Well, hello, my name is Ringo, and I'm about to review the face dances. Now, there's a lot of YouTube record reviewer geniuses who are always saying this album by The Who is so mediocre and bad at 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. But honestly, they're missing the point. Of course, they're wrong. And, you had to live way back then to really appreciate and understand all the changes and phases of The Who. And, we've got guys on YouTube saying, oh, Tommy's great and Who's Next and Quadrophenia. Those are the only good ones. And, all the others are like number 11 or something. Like Face Dances is just past Endless Wire. It's like number 18 on the list of best Who albums. It's just so mediocre or terrible, And 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. And they are saying this increasingly about Who Are You. And when I grew up, Who Are You was never known to be anything less than a great album. It's like Who's Next, Quadrophenia, and Tommy, and Live at Leeds, and The Who Sell Out. It's up there with the greatest. And Who by Numbers, Face Dances, and It's Hard were the three most recent Who albums that kind of took some abuse from fans and critics alike. But of course, Clark the Shark would come along at 1-800-449-8255, and I would set the record straight. Now, It's Hard is a really good album. Its problem is, you want to hate it, just like you want to hate Face Dances. And you want to love Tommy, Who's Next, and Quadrophenia. You want to love the early glory days of The Who at 1-800-449-8255. And you want to root for the earlier Who. And then me, Clark the Shark, I kind of catch the disease. I catch the fever. And I want to hate Face Dances and It's Hard. But truthfully, when I sit down and listen to these albums, I can't hate these, man. When I carefully play song by song, these albums are all really good. And the four latent Who albums being Who by Numbers, Who Are You, Face Dances, and It's Hard, they're all different, man. They're all apples to bananas to oranges to tangerines, man, to mangoes. I mean, you cannot compare the albums. There is a theme that runs through them that Pete is getting old, and the lyrics are kind of downcast take on life, especially on the Who by Numbers, probably the most. But then it's almost like Who by Numbers and Who Are You are like a little rock opera, where Who Are You comes along and sort of redoes and revisits Who by Numbers, but dresses it up with some really nice keyboards and bells and whistles at 1-800-449-8255, Clark the Shark Show. And it's just I really like all these albums. 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark, the Wolfman Jack on crack, coming to you from the golden EIB Sharkraphone. And here's the thing about Face Dances, which is different from those other three albums, where It's Hard, Who Are You, and Who by Numbers are really kind of downcast and like a bleak look at life. This album, Face Dances, is kind of funny and weird. It's almost like How Can You Do It Alone and Cash Cash. The lyrics are really good and they're really funny, man. It's almost like if Frank Zappa went commercial and made a funny album complaining about life, it would be the Who Face Dances. I swear to God, I'm not kidding. Because It's Hard is a much more solid album than Face Dances. It's Hard, there's more meat and potatoes on that album. But this album has better, catchier pop material on it than It's Hard has. So these two albums kind of balance each other out in a weird way. Kind of like the Who by Numbers and Who Are You. The way those two albums, they're kind of morose. Pete's in this malaise where he's getting old and he's getting confused and, getting kind of sad and bored. He just wants to watch TV all day. And, the record label, Cold Honey, they want you to tour. I don't want to. Like Pete's just down, at Who by Numbers and really down, man. And then Who Are You? It's pretty much the same thing, but of course Who Are You is all dressed up with keyboards. To me, it's a fascinating album, man. And I kind of wish Who Are You had been a double album. It would have been like another Quadrophenia for the Who. The Who kind of missed some opportunities in these later days here of the Who. I sometimes think Who by Numbers could have been expanded into a killer double album, made it a little better, added some keyboards and some bells and whistles. But I definitely believe that about Who Are You. But Face Dances, I like this as a single disc. This album is much more interesting and clever than the public and the critics. It deserves better than history has given it. And, look, it gets 2 stars. And I mean, what are you talking about? At 1-800-449-8255. Of course, You Better You Bet is a classic, really good Who song. It sounds more like a Pete Townsend solo song. Don't Let Go the Coat, to me, is just kind of a boring, lame song, but, I've heard it on the radio back in the day, and it's kind of, functions as a hit song. It's one of those songs that's more of a hit than it is good. I will solidly say that about Don't Let Go the Coat. But Cash Cash, the lyrics are just hilarious about where Pete's in a bear pit and, have you ever slept in a bear pit with mice and scratching mice and shared your straw? And, it's just this funny song about Pete drunk, wandering into a bear pit. And then just by chance, the bears weren't there. They lucky for Pete, or he'd be dead, Cash Cash. It's just such a funny, ironic song. I mean, it's not a very good song, but the lyrics almost save the song. And then when you really stop and think about it, you just start cracking up, because it's so funny, man. And every Who song is funny. One of the things you don't realize about all the Who albums, all the Who songs, is these guys are always funny like the Who Sell Out. Even on Who's Next, even on Quadrophenia, even on Tommy, the Who are always clowning around, but in this weird way, like it's a dream, like you're having a nightmare, and the Who are just messing with you. Pete and especially John Entwistle are just a couple of pranksters. But this album, I like Face Dances, for kind of the shitty, bad album it is. It sneaks up on you because it's got like 5 really good Who songs on it. And then the lame songs, the 4 songs that are problematic are so funny. The lyrics are just so ironic. And what's funny about these lyrics is they really have nothing to do with you. It's all about Pete here. He changes his writing style. And, but I really love The Quiet One by Entwistle. It's an amazing song. It's awesome. And John's kind of being sardonic and depressed, like everybody calls me the quiet one. you know, in that Entwistle voice. It's just a really rocking song, though. I love the quiet one. And Did You Steal My Money? Probably the weakest song on this album. But it's funny, man. The lyrics are hilarious. It's like Frank Zappa. But, it's just, and it's really deadpan humor. Like, if Who Are You tried to be funny, it would be Did You Steal My Money? And, once again, like Cash Cash, it's not that good of a song, but it's funny. The lyrics are just so ironic. And then How Can You Do It Alone? It's just a classic Who song, it leads off side 2. And I really like side 2 of this album. How Can You Do It Alone, as retarded and lame and stupid a song as it is, when you go back and read those lyrics, man, it is hilarious. It's like Pete has forgotten like how to masturbate, or like he doesn't know how to jack off because he's in this boring life, he's like this run-of-the-mill guy, married, and it's just funny, man. It's just so ironic. Like Pete is like, wait a minute, how can you do it alone? Like he's forgotten. It's just so funny, and it's like Cash Cash. It's hilarious, it's funny shit. And Daily Records is a surprisingly good song, man. I like it. I also like the little, songwriter parts in it are interesting. I like that song, Daily Records. And You, another Entwistle song, man. I like it. I really love You, and I really love The Quiet One. A great couple of great songs. And of course, a Who classic. Another Tricky Day. It's just awesome lyrics. It's one of those Pete Townsend solo songs, but then he decided to give it to The Who. And of course, those Pete Townsend solo albums, Pete's like, saving his best records for himself. And it really was true, Empty Glass and, All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes, and all those albums, even White City, would have made a great Who album. But Pete was, and then today you look back on it all and you're like, Pete, what do these solo albums do for you today in 2023? Well, they probably make him a little money, but Pete's worth what, 200 million? What does he care about money? It would have been great if Pete would have just gotten rid of the solo career and made these Who albums better. But all being said and done, it's still an interesting album at 1-800-449-8255. I can't really joke around about this album, The Who Face Dances, the way I want to clown around about Who Are You, because I respect the humor here. Pete is in a new phase in 1981. And I don't think Pete liked this album, and I don't think the Who themselves were too wild about this. I like Kenny Jones's drumming, though, at 1-800-449-8255. And of course, Entwistle, solid as a rock, always. And, yeah, man, I like the Who Face Dances. Serious. It's a solid album. Pete is still self-deprecating with this I'm getting old theme that started with the Who by Numbers and went through Who Are You, and it continues on this album. But now he's torturing himself with a whole new irony. He's using humor. And that is very funny, my friends. The Who Face Dances. It's a funny album. The lyrics are just hysterical. Frank Zappa, I don't know if Frank Zappa would like this, but he definitely would be like, give it a lowbrow stare or something, or just be confused. But Pete, once again, he's one of a kind. He's one in a million. He makes you laugh by not making you laugh. Like, you almost look at this album and you're like, what the hell is this? But there's so many good songs on it. There's 5 really great Who songs on this album that you can't deny. And I don't really like "Don't Let Go the Coat." I like "Daily Records" more than that song. But I would love to have produced this album to make it better. Maybe make these songs catchier. At 1-800-449-8255, The Who, Face Dances. Much like "Who Are You?", Pete's getting old. The Who are getting old. They're writing about it. It's a recurring theme. This is like the trilogy. Who by numbers, Who Are You, and this. But then, of course, as we all know, It's Hard would come along and continue and make it into like a four, a trilogy plus one. But the lyrics are a little different on the Who, It's Hard. They're a little more like serious and worldly. Pete's still needling himself and worried about getting old, but in a different way. And this was an interesting album to me back in the day, 1981. I was just a kid. I remember hearing it. I liked "Another Tricky Day" and "You Better You Bet." Sure, they're hit songs. But this whole album in general, to me, is not the bad album that people claim or say it is. And much like "It's Hard," this album is up against Quadrophenia and "Who's Next." I mean, no albums can compete with those. No album can compete with "Live at Leeds" or "Tommy" or "The Who Sell Out" or "Who Are You?" I put "Who Are You" in that class of those great Who albums. And I almost want to put "Who by Numbers" and this one and "It's Hard." I love these albums. I love them all in different ways. You can't compare them. They're just totally different. The Who are just so schizophrenic, and they're almost like bipolar or something. Like the Who is just, or like autistic. They're just so weird. At 1-800-449-8255. I've never really heard those two recent Who albums. The one called "Who" and "Endless Wire." I've heard bits and fragments of them, and I really like what I heard. But I'd have to sit down and just carefully scrutinize, every ounce of those albums before I can make a judgment. But I've heard